Hey guys, welcome to another science lesson with HK Math and Science. This video will be about volcanoes and earthquakes and its relationship with tectonic plates. By the end of this lesson, we should all know what happens in an earthquake and a volcanic eruption, be able to explain why earthquakes and volcanic activity is most likely to happen near plate boundaries, and finally be able to explain why Australia is a stable continent. So just pause the video here and take a couple of minutes to write these down. Alright, so let's start off on the topic of volcanoes. So a volcano is a place where extremely hot material from inside the earth erupts at the earth's surface. This material can include gas such as steam and hydrogen sulfide, ash made of fine rock particles, so stuff like this up the top here, lava, and lumps of solid volcanic rock, example scoria, and that's an example of scoria over here. So volcanoes form where extremely hot molten rock called magma has accumulated below weak spots in the Earth's crust. The magma is sometimes pushed up with great force out of the volcano, which is known as a volcanic eruption, and once the magma reaches the surface, it is known as lava. So magma, if it's under the ground, it's called magma. If it comes up above the ground, it's called lava. It erupts at temperatures of over 1200 degrees, and the lava changes color as it cools. It starts off as white, and as it cools down, it goes from yellow to orange to red and finally becomes a solid rock. Right now, let's explore the volcano's relationship with plate boundaries. So most volcanoes are at or near the edges of tectonic plates. Alright, so hopefully we know what tectonic plates are by now. If you don't, just feel free to ask your teacher in class. But this is because the movement of plates creates a weakness in the crust and also generates intense heat that can melt rock. The magma underneath then finds its way up through the weaknesses in the crust. And if the edges of the tectonic plates occur under the ocean, chains of volcanic islands tend to form. An example of this is the Lesser Sunda Islands in Indonesia. And island arcs are more common in the ocean because rocks that contain a lot of water melt at a much lower temperature. This is important because the more rock that is melted, it means there's more magma. So that comes out of the volcano. So that means there's more magma or lava coming out of the volcano, which forms into a rock once it's cooled down, forming these volcanic islands. Alright, so let's have a closer look at what happens when island arcs or volcanic islands are created. So subduction causes the crust to weaken whilst generating a lot of heat. And remember, subduction is when the crust of the earth goes back underground. And in this process, the crust melts and forms magma, and then the magma is pushed back up out of the surface, creating a string of volcanic islands. So this is more common towards the edges of tectonic plates because all this happens around there. Seafloor spreading happens at the ocean ridges, which causes subduction, and that's all around where volcanic eruptions are most likely to occur. However, despite all this, there are some volcanoes that happen well away from the edge of the plates. And these volcanoes sit over something called hotspots in the Earth's crust. Hotspots are isolated weak spots in the crust where a lot of magma is being created. So if you have a look at this map, you can notice that the hotspots are well away from the crust. They can occur under oceanic or continental plates, and geologists are not yet quite sure why these hotspots exist. So if there are hotspot volcanoes in the ocean, these volcanoes tend to occur in a chain of islands. This is because in each island there is always one island with an active volcano, while all the other islands have dormant or inactive volcanoes. This is because each island formed as it sat over the hotspot, so once upon a time it was over the hotspot, but as the plate moved, like we can see here, the island went with it, the island also moved down, and so the island no longer sat over the hotspot. A new part of the plate was now above the hotspot, and this gradually forms a new volcano. So as it moves down, another volcano will form again. Alright, now moving on to earthquakes. An earthquake is the rapid movement of the ground, usually back and forth and up and down in a wave motion. So if you're wondering what earthquakes are caused by, earthquakes are caused by the movement of tectonic plates, and tectonic plates are usually held together by the force of friction, but sometimes the forces in the crust become so large that the plates move. This movement sends out waves of energy through the rock and the water, causing the ground beneath us to shake. Alright, so how do we detect earthquakes? Earthquakes are measured using an instrument called a seismometer. And the waves that the earthquakes send off are known as seismic waves, and there are three main types of seismic waves that can be detected on a seismometer. The first of these is the primary wave, or P waves. These travel fast through the earth and they move the ground back and forth. Second one is called secondary waves, or S waves. They travel slightly slower than P waves, and they move the ground up and down. So P waves goes back and forth. Secondary waves are up and down. And surface waves, these are the ones that we feel. Surface waves are the slowest waves and cause the most destruction. And so where do earthquakes occur? Nearly all earthquakes start at the edge of the tectonic plate. So this is around about where volcanic eruptions would occur as well. The place where the quakes start is called the focus, like you can see in the image here. Where it starts will be called the focus, and this may be many hundreds of kilometers deep into the earth. The point on the earth's surface directly above the focus is called the epicenter, and buildings near the epicenter are usually the most heavily damaged, as you would imagine. And by now you would have realized that Australia is a relatively stable country. We don't have volcanic eruptions and we don't have many earthquakes. And there are two main reasons for this. The first one is that the lithosphere under Australia is around 200 kilometers deep, about double the depth for other continents, and this makes the continent resistant to melting and fracture. The second reason is that Australia is not near the plate boundaries, like you can see here. These are all the plate boundaries and Australia is like right in the middle. There's nothing really close to it, and has therefore had very few earthquakes or volcanoes. So we do still have these occasionally, but it is very rare. Alright, now that brings us to the end of this video. Hopefully by now you guys know what happens in an earthquake and a volcanic eruption, can explain why earthquakes and volcanic activity is most likely to happen near plate boundaries, and finally can explain why Australia is a stable continent. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys all back online.